Bonjour mon petit chiffonnier, Amber here, and June is coming to a close, so I am back with my June reading wrap up. Before we get started, please excuse the air conditioning, the AC in the background. Okay, so this month wasn't a struggle reading wise, it was just a struggle because there was a lot happening in the first week or so of June. If you don't know, I was meant to be at BookCon. My mom got sick while we were up in Boston to see the 1975, so I was in Boston a week longer than I was supposed to be. Literally left Boston exactly a week after I got there. So when I was supposed to only be there for one night. So there was a lot of stress going on, and it just took a while for my brain to get back to being able to read. So this month I read 2 books. Actually, technically, I just remembered I read 3 books. One was a reread that I listened to on Audible. So this shouldn't take too long. So, like I just mentioned, one of the books I finished this month. Did I say year or month? Anyway, this month was a reread that I listened to on Audible, and it was Legendary by Stephanie Garber, which is the sequel to Caraval. I listened to it so I could prepare myself to read Finale, which I wanted to read in June when I got home. I didn't get around to it, so it would be the first thing I read in July. Last year, do you mind? Last year when Legendary came out, I listened to Caraval to brush up before I went to the story, so that's kind of my tradition now. There's not too much to say. I already read it, I've already talked about it, so I will link below I don't know if it's in a reading vlog or a wrap up from when I read it the first time. My thoughts really haven't changed that much. I still like it a lot more than I liked Caraval, and I'm really hoping that Finale takes it up to an even higher level, especially if this is the last book. I have high hopes because it's told through both Scarlett and Tella's points of view, and I just get the whole squad. So, after that, not necessarily after that, I was reading it at the same time. At one point I was reading all 3 of these books at the same time, but I'll get into that in a minute. So after that, the next book I finished was Beast Player by Naoko Uehashi. I started reading this in the last week of May. This was the final book that I intended to read for the Asian Readathon last month. I didn't finish reading it before May was over, so I just carried it over to June. Briefly, this book is about a young girl named Elin, who at the beginning of the book is basically exiled from her village, who are these they're called Toda warrior riders or something like that, where they ride these serpentine beasts into battle. That she is exiled from her village when her mother is killed. Her mother sends her away to protect her. Elin is then taken in by this recluse, this beekeeper, who basically raises her, and then she ends up at this school, which is also a royal beast sanctuary. The royal beasts are the natural enemy of the Toda, and they also are these magical flying animals that protect the queen. And there she realizes that she has this magical ability to communicate with said beasts, and this story takes place from the time she's 10 to 20 something. So it's like a 10-year basically span of a story. It's original. This book in particular is translated from Japanese. It was originally written in Japanese, which was why I picked it for the Asian Readathon. It was one of the criteria to read a book translated from the author's native language. So I really enjoyed this book. I read a lot of fantasy, but this kind of still seemed really different from books that I read previously. It took a whole month to read this book, but not because I didn't enjoy it. One, there's just a lot happening. This is about 500 pages of story. I found out while reading it that this is actually 2 parts of a 4-part series, and after finding that out, I kind of do wish that the last 2 parts were also translated and like bound up in the book. Also, I love this cover a lot. Oh, I do have a few notes. Yeah, like I said, the book, it's a lot happening. The book really takes its time introducing us to Elin. I guess we learn about her view of the world, and it's basically, we do definitely grow up with Elin. I really enjoy the way the book itself is written. It's kind of like, it's almost, it's weird to description, but like almost has like a musical quality to the way it's written, the way it flows. Also, I think that the discussion that's opened, I guess, around the royal beasts and the Toda, it's really reflective of our world and how we treat animals in reality, specifically, which it reminded me of basically whales in captivity versus whales in the wild, especially when she's like comparing the differences between the animals that are raised in captivity versus the ones in the wild. Like, there are moments where I really specifically thought of orcas. Orcas, and how when they're put in like an aquarium or a zoo or whatever. Are whales put in zoos? No. When they're put in captivity, the one thing I always thought of, because whales are like my favorite animal, one of my favorite animals. If you don't know that, you should. their like fin will fold over, so when we see the whales with their little folded over fin, that's not how they are. I always thought that was fascinating, like when I was really little, and would watch Free Willy every single day of my life. So it reminded me of whales and also elephants, and how they are treated and basically prodded and tortured basically into performing for humans. Also, elephants are also my favorite animals. So whales and elephants are right up there for me, if you don't know, which you should. I already said that about wishing that the other 2 parts of the book were translated, even though the way this ended really did feel like an ending. I also really liked, which is very contradictory of me because I love me a fantasy with some romance, I kind of liked that was never a focus of this book. What happens after this part of the story ends, I don't know, because there were some there was what I assume would then become something, I don't know, but I just really enjoyed this. And then the next book I read and just finished like an hour ago is like my favorite read of the year so far. One of my top 3 most anticipated reads of the year. I'm not tone deaf, I promise. We Hunt the Flame by House of Faisal. If I weren't being lazy, I would really get all 4 of my copies of this book and hold it up. I have 4 copies of this book, and I had 3 of the 4 copies before I even started reading this book. But like I said, this was, before I get into that, this story, this is the story of Zafira and Nasir. It is told in dueling points of view. Zafira is the huntress. Let me read how people lived because she killed. People died because he lived. So Zafira is the huntress. She, for years, has been disguising herself as a man and secretly hunting in the magical Ars, which is this magical, I guess, forest that drives anybody who steps foot into it mad. Except for her, she's the only one that's been able to return from the Ars unscathed. I was saying, oh, she's been hunting there to provide for her, basically her state, her caliphate, is that what it's called? Whereas Nasir is the crown prince of their whole country, and Arawaya, and he is the Prince of Death, this assassin who kills for his father. And this is the story of when they are sent on to this magical lost island to return. Well, Zafira is sent to the island to find this lost magical artifact that will return magic to their world, and Nasir is sent there to find her, kill her, and return the artifact to his father. It's a ancient Arabian inspired fantasy that has also been said to have been inspired by The Hunger Games and Lord of the Rings. And if you know anything about me and have watched more than 2 of my videos, you know The Hunger Games is like my favorite series of all time. So that in and of itself was enough to get me to read this book and know I would love this book. And I definitely picked up on all the little Hunger Games nods. I haven't read The Lord of the Rings, but a lot of my tabs are actually like different notes about like, oh, this is like when this happened, but it's not in a way that feels like a ripoff at all. I just am weird and can like I compare everything to The Hunger Games, actually, even my own writing. So anyway, I love this book so much. One, I will say, because I've mentioned The Hunger Games 4 different times, and I will say it before I forget, I've said several times this book is like all of my favorite books wrapped up in one. It has Hunger Games vibes to it. It has the Wrath from the Dawn vibes to it. It has a twinge of like Children of Blood and Bone vibes to it. I love it so much. I love the adventure. I love the world that it's set in. I love every single character in this book. I am overly attached. Zafira reminds me so much of Katniss, but also not at all like Katniss. And I just almost dropped this. I also have a note here that says Dean, Dean, Dean. I feel like I don't see enough people talking about Dean. I see all the Nasira going on, but Dean is the most precious human being, I was going to say in the world, but he is a fictional character. And every single time he takes her pinky, I die inside, and then I'm reborn. And how I describe it, because he, not to spoil anything, but he's like her best friend's brother, therefore her best friend. And in my brain that compares everything to The Hunger Games, I'm like, oh, he's like the Gale, but Gale if he had Peeta's personality, because Gale Hawthorne can choke. I just love him. He's precious. He deserves the whole world, and that's all I'm going to say on that. But yeah, I love all the characters. I love how they come together and form their little Zumra, is that what it's called? Their gang. I like the way they really complement each other, and I can't wait. Well, I love Altair so much. In fact, one of my notes is, hold on, let me see if I can find it. I think Altair, next to Dean, Altair is my favorite character. Even I love them all equally, honestly, and I would protect them with my lives, even though they could all kill me. Every single one of them could murder me, but it's fine. So here's my husband, one of several. But there's this line that says about Altair, it was alarming how jovial and deadly he could be at once, and that's literally my favorite thing about him. I love this book. I love the danger. I love the adventure. I love the fact that a lot of the stories about like facing your own darkness and then trusting people, which is something I don't have strength with. I love the whole, like, I love me a good squad, you know? It has sort of like a found family aspect going on. I knew I was going to love this book, and I'm so glad that I wasn't disappointed, and it gets all the stars in the world, and I know I'm yelling, and it's probably because I just finished reading the book, and I'm still overwhelmed. I said to my mother when I finished reading the book, I was like, I had so many things to do today. I was supposed to write. I was supposed to pour a candle. I did do that, but I did that before I finished reading the book. I'm finally able to film these videos, but at the time, all I wanted to do was just lie down and have time to mourn the fact that I'm done this book. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm glad I have the rest of the month to just recover before I try to read another book. I need the sequel. Read We Hunt the Flame. And I'm like just so hyped about, I'm always so hyped about any book written by a person of color, a woman of color. And in this case, we have this Muslim woman of color. I mean, yes, sis. We love a minority. We support the minorities. Anyway, read the We Hunt the Flame. I almost said The Wrath in the Dawn. Maybe because The Wrath in the Dawn feels like I'm cheating on it. So those are the books that I read this month. I'm sweating. I don't know what I'm going to do in July. Somehow I've convinced myself to take place in the Reading Rush, which was formerly Booktube-a-thon. Yeah, okay, we'll see. So I have no idea right now what I'm reading in July, because I still have to choose books for that, let alone what I'm going to read up until July 22nd, because it's from the 22nd to the 28th. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you like this video for some bizarre reason, please give it a thumbs up. If you like me for some bizarre reason, feel free to subscribe. All my places are down here, so you can follow me and I'll follow you back. And we can be buds. And I'll see you very soon.